Welcome to the second power rankings of 2019. And there's a lot more movement this week than there was last week. A couple market corrections and some teams that started playing well, some teams that didn't, and some teams that passed other teams because other teams were playing worse. It was a week that left me going basically. Because again, last week we had everything kind of stay the same. This week there's 5 teams that stay in the same place. Raising or falling one spot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 plus 13 teams either stayed in the same spot or moved up one or moved down one. Number 31, down 2 spots, is Detroit. Now, they won tonight against Minnesota, but in my eyes, they still didn't have a very good week. And it's the results. And yeah. At number 30, moving up 1 spot from last week. Going to be getting cocky about this, aren't you, Ottawa? Ottawa had a run of 2 wins in 3 games in California. The loss tonight against San Jose, for me, didn't drop them below Detroit. I thought the 2 wins against LA and Anaheim were impressive for a team that's been out of it for a while, and for a team that could be forgiven for just saying, screw it, and just throw in the towel. And they really generally haven't. Number 29, dropping a lot. Dropping 10, which is suitable because Anaheim's lost 10 in a row. Early in the week, I realized I can't have Anaheim up that high. And it was kind of lost to Edmonton. It was the way that it happened. Combined with, and then the loss against Pittsburgh last night, I was like, all right, this team is just hot garbage right now. And I can't say they're losing, but they're close at this stage. It's and then losing close against Ottawa, well, it's I could argue that Ottawa should be 29th ahead of them. But I only dropped them 10 spots. Dropping 1 spot from last week is Philly. The good news, if you're a Flyers fan, Carter Hart looks like he's a real deal, and it looks like he's ready now. The bad news is kind of everything else about the Flyers. Their record continues to be iffy. They got the win over Dallas this week, which I thought pointed out how Dallas sucks on the road more than anything else. But, because they do. And, so for me, Philly, they remain towards that bottom portion of the league, and I don't see them pulling their way out of it. Number 27, moving up 3 spots from last week. They had a good week, did the Arizona Coyotes, and maybe they will find themselves in some kind of a playoff hunt. Now, the level of the opposition they had kept them from moving up a lot further, but they had a good week. And if they have another week like that, they'll probably experience a bit of a jump. Number 26, dropping 1 spot from last week, is Florida. So the Florida Panthers are in 26th. They went through and almost beat and then didn't beat the Edmonton Oilers. They then had a shot at Calgary, but nope. And tomorrow they have a date with the Vancouver Canucks, but the Vancouver Canucks have had their problems lately too. I'm wearing Vancouver gear because I really haven't had an excuse to wear it, and I still don't really. But I'm wearing the stuff from the 80s because that's when they were really bad. Number 26, moving up 1 spot from last week, is LA. The Kings are flirting with respectability. They're showing that they're not willing to quit. Much like Ottawa, they're deciding, you know what, we're just going to keep going here. That being said, they did lose against these Senators, and it was good to see them beat Pittsburgh, but again, the consistent wins just aren't there for them to move them up a whole lot beyond what they are. Number 24, down 4 spots from last week, is Vancouver. Vancouver, honestly, they're really, really close to being at this level. And I don't know that when Pettersson returns that it's going to be this magic elixir. And now I'm starting to hear about how Pettersson's, he'll be one of the Hart nominees and he should be voted for Hart. If people vote for Pettersson for the Hart, when you've got Kucherov and you've got Goudreau and Crosby and Ovechkin, I will start to have my doubts about the way voting for the Hart Trophy is done. The Hart Trophy is the MVP of the league. So really, honestly, should be the MVP for one of the better teams in the league. And I understand why people are saying Pettersson. I also understand why people are saying McDavid and Edmonton, but I really can't see it happening. I just can't. Number 23, moving up 5 spots from last week, is St. Louis. I cannot deny that St. Louis is able to win some impressive games. Now, they lose enough other games that they're not going higher than that, unless they win 3 in a row this week or something like that. But for me, I have no problem having them ahead of the teams that are at the rest of the bottom of the league right now. St. Louis, they beat Dallas. That's what they had to do in Bennington, 3-0. There's some hope there. Number 22, moving up 2 spots from last week, are the New Jersey Devils. And for New Jersey, they might have stayed in the same spot, but, when you see Blackwood getting some wins here, and there's some Devils that are waking up, and the fact that the Devils, they play solid at home, the 80s night thing against Toronto notwithstanding, they play pretty well at home, and if they go with Blackwood, and if they keep getting Hischier to the level that he's at right now, if he's able to stay there when Taylor Hall returns, they might have themselves a growing concern next year. And it's not going to happen this year, but at the very least, they can play spoiler and win their share of games down the stretch. Number 21, moving up 1 spot from last week, are the Rangers. Up and down week. And that's kind of what you expect with the Rangers. They're still a game below 500. I think they're 18, 19, and 7 so far. And tomorrow they are playing in Columbus. So it'll be the red, white, and blue versus the red, white, and blue. And I'm guessing a team that wears red, white, and blue wins that game. And I guarantee it, because that's the kind of guy I am. But yeah, so for me, the Rangers, there's some signs there that maybe some of the players that could be on the trade block are increasing their value, but I don't see a whole lot else there with the Rangers to make me say, yeah, they're going to end up making a run at it. Number 20 and down 3 spots from last week is Colorado. The Avs' fall has been precipitous. It started with the lopsided loss they suffered against Tampa. The shutout loss against Montreal tonight is disconcerting. They are losing games now against teams, and they're not really close. And yet they're out shooting teams in some of these situations and still finding ways to lose. I'm looking at the game in Winnipeg. I'm looking at the game in Calgary. Montreal, not as much, but still, they were close on the shot clock. Just couldn't get the goals. And it's weird because earlier in the week it was the goaltending sinking them, and tonight it was they couldn't score. So Colorado is finding ways to lose right now. Number 19, kind of by default, the Oilers move up 4 spots. Kind of by default. Think about this. Last week, Anaheim's in 19th. These guys are in 17th, right? Who else did they pass? They passed Colorado. Vancouver dropped 4. So they were in 23. Yeah, I mean, they passed Vancouver. So again, people are going to look at this and say, why did Edmonton go up? Because of the weeks everybody else had. They beat Florida. So, Vancouver not beating much anybody. And, so it was more of a week of, because Edmonton didn't lose as much or as badly. That loss against Arizona tonight doesn't help. But again, I couldn't justify dropping Edmonton down below Colorado based on the way Colorado's been playing lately either. So, there's that. Number 18, moving up 3 spots because I'm impressed with how they're playing. I realize that the results haven't been playoff worthy, but I've been impressed with Chicago's game overall, and I think they're close. I really do. I think Delia gives them a chance every night. I think DeBrincat's having an amazing year. I think Patrick Kane is having a fantastic season as well. And Cahoon is another one, too, we don't hear a lot about, but he's having a pretty solid season as well. So there are some things to like about Chicago's game. They're still not going to make the playoffs, but they're playing well, and they're very competitive every night. And I put their effort and their talent pretty high up compared to some of the other teams that are missing the playoffs. Number 17, dropping 3 spots. They were going to stay in the same spot too. And then the loss to Philly and the loss to St. Louis. Are you serious, Dallas? There are a lot of teams right now that aren't playing very well in the NHL. It's like there are these teams that are playing well, and then there's everybody else. And right now there are a handful playing well, and Dallas is not among them. And Dallas drops 3 spots, and if not for everybody that's behind them playing somewhat worse, or there's the other part of it too, which is for some teams they're so far behind when I look at the standings and I look at the overall numbers that I can't justify just bouncing them up in the power rankings. You look at last year, what happened with Arizona, where they were all the way up to, I think, 16th at one point in the power rankings, despite being one of the lowest teams in the league. I don't know the way I do this now that could happen again. Maybe, but I highly doubt it. So they're at 17. They drop. Number 16 for a 3rd week in a row. Buffalo likes 16, although right now they're out of the playoffs. But Buffalo, an up and down week for them. Losing against Tampa isn't anything to be ashamed of. Losing against Carolina, you don't get ashamed of Carolina when you lose to them, but they had a worse week than Carolina, which is why at number 15, moving up 3 spots from last week, is Carolina. The Hurricanes are 5 points back of a playoff spot, and they're 5 or I guess 6 points back now with what happened tonight. So they're 6 points back of a playoff spot. They're not likely to make the playoffs, but they could make life miserable for teams like Buffalo. And they're clearly not just going to go away. Despite the loss against Tampa, they then came out and beat the Sabres. And there's some confidence there. Sebastian Aho seems to be getting back to where he was at the start of the year. And Matt Galini is playing out of his mind. And Mrazek's starting to get better as well. So while Carolina's not really in the picture, they're doing whatever they can to get there. So we'll see what ends up happening with them. Number 14, moving up 1 spot from last week. Despite the loss to Detroit, there are some positives from this week for Minnesota. They're not Colorado. They're not Dallas. Remember, Dallas had 14 last week, so Minnesota moves up into Dallas's old spot. And they were higher. And then they lost at home against number 31 there, and that dropped them right back down. So Minnesota is in a playoff spot. None of the teams that are behind them look really much like threats, but this year is weird. Really, really weird. And so Minnesota moves up despite the fact they lost at home tonight against Detroit. It's a weird year. Number 13, dropping 1 spot from last week. 1. Montreal. The win over Colorado was impressive. I think Montreal's playing very well. They jumped back into a playoff spot. I understand they had fallen out of that playoff spot, and that Montreal fans may very well have expected more of a drop. Now, the way that I used to do this, there probably would have been, but they only dropped 1 spot because I think they're still playing relatively well. The question I have for Montreal at this point is this. Max Domi clearly is in a bit of a slump. With Max Domi in a slump, who's going to take up that mantle and be that big scorer for them? That's the question mark I have with the Montreal Canadiens right now. Number 12, and dropping 3 spots from last week, are the New York Islanders. The loss against the Rangers hurts. That was a game you've got to get it, and they were not quite able to get it. I blame Barclays personally. I blame the SUV. I think they should play all of their games on Long Island and just say, see you to Barclays. They make more money when they're at Nassau, I would believe, than at Barclays. It's, the attendance is higher, and I can't think for a minute that all the concessions and private boxes and whatever else in Barclays would mean that they make a lot more money than they do at Nassau. Yeah, I think they need to get that new building in Belmont as soon as possible. But that being said, I can only go by the results, and the results tell me that right now I have them at 12th. Number 11, up 2 spots from last week. Columbus, that very, very interesting story that is the Columbus Blue Jackets. The Columbus Blue Jackets, one of the more boring organizations in the league, whether it's the logo, whether it's the fact they've never won a playoff round, they just kind of linger around and then they're out. and just they don't have any electrifying part of their organization. Well, now with the Bobrovsky story, that might all be changing. And then whatever happens with Panarin between now and the trade deadline, Columbus may very well have just got really, really exciting. And so they jump up this week. They had a couple of very nice victories with Korpisalo in net. That's interesting. And it's more interesting than anything I've seen happen with Columbus for a while. So really, really going to be paying attention to what happens with Korpisalo, what happens with Bobrovsky, and what happens with Columbus from here. Really, really interested. Number 10, staying in the same spot as last week, is Nashville. Nashville's got everybody back. And I get the feeling that it's going to happen and they're going to pick it up. But they've been kind of slow on doing so. And so they don't drop, because they're winning enough they're not going to drop. But they're not convincing enough in my eyes right now to move up. So they stay in 10th. I had them higher coming into tonight, but somebody jumped past them. Number 9, moving up 2 spots, the Boston Bruins. The Bruins, I'm nervous to say, oh no, they're good. Yeah, they're back, they're good. This is going to be great. Because I've kind of been there before as a Bruins fan. And this year, it definitely makes me nervous about the Bruins. The loss against Washington being a good example of that. But that being said, that to me spoke about the fact Washington was back on their own bandwagon, and Boston still played a pretty solid game there. So based on the win tonight, I took them from 10th, moved them up to 9th. Down to 8th, down 4 spots from last week, and it's the same story as the week before. Last week, I had Washington drop down based on some losses. This week, it's Toronto. Toronto is still a really solid team, and you'll notice I have them ahead of Boston. That is not by accident. They're ahead of Boston because I still think in that game tonight there was some good fortune that smiled on the Boston Bruins. Once Freddie Anderson comes back for Toronto, and there's some uncertainty about when that's going to happen. It was a groin injury, and then it's illness, and then there's the whole waiver issue with Hutchinson, which isn't going to matter. They're just going to waive Hutchinson. He's going to pass through waivers. He's done it before. But Toronto, for me, is still one of the better teams in the league. And even though they've suffered a couple of setbacks, they're still top 8. This top 8, it's going to rotate like this. This is how it's going to happen, where there's going to be a team that's in 8th place that their fan base isn't going to be happy about it. Number 7, staying in the same spot as last week, is Vegas. I think I've found kind of a good spot for Vegas. They were 6 2 weeks ago. They were 7th last week. They're 7th this week. And I think that's right about where they belong. Now, they had that loss against San Jose, which hurt them, because I was ready to move them up. But that loss against San Jose told me that while they're playing very well, and tonight against Chicago they did it again, but I still don't see them as being in that top 6. And San Jose I kind of sort of do right now. So for me, I have no problem with them still being at 7. Number 6, down 1 spot from last week, is Winnipeg. The Jets are flirting with dropping out of the top 6. They're flirting with dropping out of the top 7, possibly the top 8. The thing is, they've won 14 out of 20. They've won a lot of games, and it is really hard to drop a team down when they're winning enough games to stay up there. But in my eyes, it's fragile. Or as my wife would say, Winnipeg's not playing well right now. She's very, very nervous about Winnipeg. Even when they win, she's pointing out they probably shouldn't have won that game. Okay. That being said, Winnipeg won enough this week to stay up there, but there are some concerning signs if you're a Jets fan. Absolutely. And I think there's an argument to be made that Brossoit needs to play more. I've made that argument. I'm not necessarily going to make it again here. Number 5, moving up 3 spots from last week. There you go, Caps fans. You're right back in the top 5. I knew you would be. It was just last week, because of the fact they lost, they dropped down. Nobody else on the chart in the top 8 was dropping. I think this top 8, I could see this being the top 8 for the rest of the year, potentially. I could see Boston, Nashville getting in there and messing things up. Columbus, sure. I think those are probably your top teams in the league, though. And And definitely Nashville was up at the top of the charts not that long ago. So they can get back there again. I don't know if number one will ever belong to anybody that's not the Tampa Bay Lightning. But for Washington, they move back up to 5. Number 4, dropping one spot from last week. 1. The Pittsburgh Penguins. I believe they lost 2 this week, didn't they? Anyways. For Pittsburgh, it's been a really solid week. I think when you look at that win over Anaheim, that shows that they're still capable of running up the score. When you look at the loss against LA, you could chalk that up to just running into a hot goaltender. Jonathan Quick's been a hot goaltender before. I believe he's won some playoff games in his career. So no shame in that. But for me, I had to drop them down to 4th because I thought there were 3 teams that were just had better weeks this week. San Jose's in 3. And I'm 99% sure that's the highest they've been this year. Now, I don't track this every week. There's other people that I know have spreadsheets and they track it. And I'm very grateful for that because at the end of last season, I was like, yeah, I wonder if anybody tracks this. And then I had all these spreadsheets sent to me. So that's very cool. It's actually a lot of fun, and I enjoy that. And San Jose right now is enjoying life quite a bit. Carlson's playing very well. Brent Burns is playing, as Doug Wilson said tonight, probably the best hockey of his career. Joe Thornton's playing very well in what I think is his last year. There's a lot to like. And now Martin Jones has his numbers up as well, so San Jose's playing like they want to win something in the playoffs. The problem is one of the top 2 teams is in their division. And for the Flames, it was a very good week. They are still number 2. They had an excellent week. I honestly think that if I had a vote, and I don't, somebody came to me right now and said, Shannon, who gets the Hart Trophy? I would say Johnny Gaudreau. Not because Nikita Kucherov isn't having a great season, but because without Johnny Gaudreau, the Flames would not be in this position. Without Nikita Kucherov, Tampa has so many bloody weapons. And there's so much depth. And with Calgary, I don't see it in that same light. So that's why, for me, I would put my vote behind Gaudreau. But number 1 for forever is Tampa. So if you're a Tampa fan, you know you're number 1. And there really isn't anything to say about it. They haven't been dominant in their wins lately. They've been fortunate to win a couple of their games lately. I think there was some good fortune in Buffalo. I think there was some good fortune with Carolina. The thing is, they win all the time. They go out there and they win. And it's what they do. And when they lose a game, they then go out and win the next 3. And it'll end up being the next 9 and the next 12. And yeah, so for me, that's where I see everybody playing right now. That's where I have everybody right now. And I have no problem with these ratings. That being said, let's go ahead and shift things around a little bit. No. Put that there. This. No. No. Okay. Yeah. You're going there. You're going there. You're going there. Put that there, actually. Oh, yeah. Yep. Okay. All right, so as you can see, the most vicious cat is the Predator, and therefore they're number 1. The third most vicious cat is the Panther. The bear cat of the Wild, because I've heard it referred to as both, makes the Wild number 3. The Bruins, bear, which is cat, which is bear, makes them 4. That's what the B stands for, bear, cat, bear. The Capitals are an eagle. An eagle is a distant cousin of the cat. Penguins, Buffaloes, there's intermingling with them. It's really complicated. That's what produces Coyotes. Ducks, complicated creatures as it is. That makes them 9. Sharks, very simplistic, able to kill everything, but not likely to do so. Fire's a very strong animal. Fire is capable of burning things or being attracted to other fire. And orcas. Orcas are useless, smelly creatures that will kill you as fast as they'll look at you. They do all these cutesy little tricks in aquariums, but in reality, they're hateful, spiteful creatures that are smarter than all of us and will eventually be the downfall of humanity. So that's why I did what I did this week. I really genuinely believe that that the Golden Knights belong here. Nobody's scared of a leaf. Tampa needs to change their jersey and their logo, and of course, there's the overall dislike for Red Wings are just I can't. I have nothing with Red Wings, nothing. All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happen upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for all your support. It's been another great week. I'll talk to you again soon.